evening, ladies and gentlemen. Our speaker today is Tom Gill. He's the grandfather of Agile. Um, I'd like to welcome Tom for this event for Business Change, SPA, and Quality SG. Here you are, Tom.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go over to my slides. So just checking, you see my full screen slide, right? I didn't hear anything. Let's see. But I'm not getting any response.
Yes, it's very clear.
Okay, good. Thank you. I couldn't be sure when I heard nothing. I thought, oh, there. Okay, if anybody'd like a copy of the slides, they can use this QR here or this tiny CC. It's Manageability slides. And you're probably wondering what Manageability is, but it is management agility. So we're looking at Agile at the level of management and organizations rather than IT and programming and things like that. We're at the level of enterprise agile. Some like to use the term business agile. I'll explain in a moment why I don't really like that term. And in very simple terms, I'm going to focus on one thing. I believe that most of the agile methods that we look at are still at what I call the mumbo jumbo level. That is, they still have unclear requirements. And I don't think you can really be agile, respond and change to unclear requirements. I think requirements have to be crystal clear and numeric. And in that case, you've got a chance at doing some real organizational level agile. Now, when I say clear, I'm also saying quantified for all the values and costs. And that leads to another key word here. What I'm saying is all about engineering, number one, engineering methods, not software engineering in the sense of coding or programming, but in the real engineering sense of lots of numbers and multiple dimensions and calculations and things like that. I believe we need to move even large-scale IT to the level of systems thinking, not programming thinking, and to engineering rather than nice-sounding words and coding. So, and I have a booklet called Vision Engineering, which you'll så va? Wendy ringer, kan du gå? Yeah. My sister is trying to ring me from Berkeley and say hello. Just call her yourself. What? Call her yourself. Okay. So my sister wasn't aware I was holding a lecture here, ringing to say hi. Okay. So we need to move to the level of systems thinking that is far more than code. And you know, in other words, people, motivation, legal things, governance, hardware, data, not least, and things like that, the whole system. And to handle these large and complex systems, we need to move from crafts, being soft crafters, and we need to move to engineering. In other words, far more systematic and quantitative ways of doing things. I believe that if we do so, we will dramatically increase our ability to deliver value to cost results for stakeholders by a factor of 3 to 10. That's based on measurements by some of my large clients like Intel that we really have done that. Let's see, our 3 sponsors here, Business Change, and this is not least a business change lecture, but my friends in Software Practice Advancement and Quality have also sponsored the and sent out invitation to join from their mailing list. Anyway, if you wonder what mumbo jumbo means, there it is, confusing and meaningless language, and I still find that that's the problem everywhere in management and in IT. too much nice sounding words and too few clear ideas of what we're going to do. Just a second, I'm going to turn off my mic. Okay, right, back. Telephone calls in the background. Let's see. Okay, yeah, that's right. So, definition of Agile, what's that? And I've got a definition I made for a board of directors of a UK bank, which I've in 2013, and I quite like it and happy to repeat it. So it's Agile is doing any set of things, let's call them tactics, that enable you to deliver a stream which you prioritize of useful results in spite of risks, problems, size, complexity, and changes. Okay, so any set of tactics that enable a prioritized stream of useful results in spite of a changing environment. My sister in California, Tira, shared this with me recently, and I liked it so much I put it in the talk. The realist adjusts the sails. That's a wonderful, very short metaphor for what Agile is about. Adjusting the sails whichever way the wind forces you to adjust them, so you can stay on course for the values that your organization wants to achieve. Now, here's another view of what I'm going to try to do in this lecture, which will be about an hour, after which we have about half an hour for questions, so you can start noting questions. If we start here, here is a little box called IT Agile. Think Scrum, teams with product owners and Scrum masters and things like that writing code. And that's what most people think of initially when they think of Agile today. It's been widely spread. But for many years, there's been a spread of Agile ideas to the something outside of this, and perhaps not even including this kind of IT Agile, which we can call by various names: Business Agile, Enterprise Agile, and I decided to call it Managility, just for fun and just to distinguish myself. So I think all businesses would say they have a certain degree of agility and a certain degree of measuring and feedback and response, and they're trying to make it better and better because the pace of change is heated up and responses are needed more quickly, etc. So there's always a degree of this, and some are very, very conscious of the fact they're trying to do Agile in a very conscious way. Now, outside of this area is what I'm going to suggest adding. In other words, I'm not going to compete directly with the conventional business and enterprise Agile methods. I'm going to suggest some additions which seem to be lacking in almost all of them as enhancements. In other words, I'm going to try to enhance or improve your degree of agility in your organization or enterprise by some very finite technologies. And these are the four. We'll talk about them more as we go along. Okay. Here's a definition of Managility. The speed we can manage to adapt to change in order to meet our objectives in a timely and economic way. Okay, I'd like you to meet Rick Dove. He's the master of Agile at the organizational level. I was hearing lectures by him in the INCOSI Systems Engineering conferences as much as 20 years back about agility. So he's been there all the time, and he's done a lot of work in the defense space, which we'll get acquainted with Rick Dove. He's still there and has an amazing PowerShift.com website for those who want to follow up in more detail what he knows about it. Here's another fellow who's in that space. He's one of my, I'd like to introduce you to Steve Blank. And if you go to steveblank.com, you can sign up for his weekly newsletter. And I read it I have to read it. It's so insightful and deep and interesting. It's unbelievable. I'm a great skeptic. I mean, most of what I hear and see, I say that's just kid stuff, and I'm not impressed. But I am impressed by Steve Blank and what he does and what he says. He is also the grandfather of lean. Is it lean startups? Okay, actually, you'll find. So he's in that area. One of the point he makes in this paper down here is that there's an old method of adopting new weapons in military situations. You innovate and you get some new stuff. But the interesting thing he adds on is it's not enough to just have some new tech and new weapons. You have to have what he calls a new doctrine. That's how we are going to deploy it together with everything else. In other words, systems thinking and not just one weapon thinking. And that's an interesting aspect. That, in other words, it's not enough to plan, for example, a new IT system. You have to plan very much how that's going to be maintained and people trained in using it and motivated to buy it and all that kind of thing. So I think that's a very interesting cycle, the cycle of you build a thingy, but then you have to also design or architect how it's going to be used in an intelligent way. And that makes all the difference. A good weapon with bad doctrine might lose you the war. Here's just a further thing from Steve where he's looking at different areas, which are our areas here: hypersonics, biotech, cyber, AI, machine learning, and space, with the same thing there. But he's very much in the military and space area. From a recent lecture here, he made a chart, which I find very, very interesting. You'll find it down there, which he looks at the way Department of Defense is doing things today, list of things, and he says this is really where we need to be. We need to be doing a lot of things a lot differently. This is an amazing list. I've never seen anything quite like it. I've highlighted the things that say, be agile and pivot and do agile contracting as you learn. But everything else there is itself really a completely new environment. I had to look up this word attritable today, and I've put the definition down there, but it basically means you can wear out the opponent and maybe even sacrifice your assets, your little drones or whatever it is, without getting too worried. But I think, although I have just about 1 minute per slide here, so I obviously can't use 20 minutes on this, which would be tempting. I think if you take a look at this in some detail, you find a whole new world of agile. No trust in anything. Okay. I put some definitions of things like primes and FOB in the presenter's notes, which are in the PowerPoint slides, if somebody wants to figure out what this military terminology is all about. Anyway, main idea, there are, let's say, about 10 or 15 distinguishing features as we shift over to this new world, which we can call agile. And he does indeed specifically use the words there. And it's about being agile in a military sense here and ensuring that we don't get obsolete while our enemies are agile. So again, summary, Managility is about quickly changing, if necessary, to meet the goals, whatever it is. So we're very goal focused. What are we trying to achieve? And if we're not achieving it, we're not moving in the right direction for any reason, whether it be our architecture or our working process or anything, then we need to quickly sense that something's wrong and do something about it. And that's very nice definition of agile. I wrote a definition like that of agile in 1976 in my book, Software Metrics, which I've quoted in the Agile lectures I've held for this same gang. So you'll find those lectures up on, like Value Agile, you'll find it up on the website where the videos are, and this video will presumably be there too. So here's same Rick Dove, who's one of the classical elders of enterprise agile, and here's my list of why I don't really want to call what I'm doing business agile. Firstly, there's a whole lot of things we don't consider to be businesses, like the government or the military, and so it's a very narrow word. And also the business agile methods that I've taken a look at, I'm not impressed, to put it mildly, because they don't have enough engineering and quantification. They're still at the bullshit level for or user story level or something like that, and that's not good enough. So I don't want to associate myself with them, and I want to distinguish myself. But he does have a very interesting point here. He will see this in several places, that agile can be applied for the process. And that's what we normally think of it as. It's the process of producing something. But he makes the point that we need to produce systems, for example, military systems or IT systems, which themselves are agile. Think low technical debt, to put it in IT terms. Okay, really easy to change. And so in other words, there are two aspects to agile. There's the agility of the hardware software system, and there's the agility of the people system, which is churning out these agile systems. And I think that's a very interesting distinction. And the methods I'm going to talk about will help you do both of these. They'll help you create an agile organization as well as agile large-scale systems. Here's a fellow I just got to know on the 2nd of October, and his name is Brian Gallagher. He's worked a long time at the Software Engineering Institute, but now he's out and is with his own company. He did a doctoral thesis on risk and agility. Very interesting. Here's the whole doctoral thesis, and there are some of his slides. But I found him very interesting, and I want to introduce you to him and his ideas. Interestingly enough, when I went deeper into why don't I hear about architecture and quantified objectives, he revealed something. I won't go too deep, but the institution he was working for had a person who was in charge of architecture, but hated quantified objectives for architecture and more or less suppressed it. So here we have major institutions suppressing the ideas of quantifying your objectives because one person got control of it. And I thought that was sad, but I've got that from two different sources, so I believe it. However, he does believe and understand that multi-dimensional quantified objectives are very interesting. So the trick he pulls is sort of doesn't talk about architecture, and then he can plug in anything he wants. It's not violating the politics of his organization. Here's a second slide from him, and he's really drawing on the capability maturity model, which I helped develop, level 4 of historically, by the way, at IBM. And he's pulling out a major tool for engineering agile systems. You can see why I like him. He's very clear about the idea that we need to engineer large-scale agile systems. And he's CMMI is what all the large defense and government institutions do, almost mandated. And he has a long list of all the good things you should do with requirements. And one of the major things I'm going to suggest here is we get much better in quantifying and structuring our objectives or requirements, especially quality requirements for systems than we are. Now I have a methods I'm going to suggest and give you free copies of my competitive engineering book on. I have a language, a planning language called Planguage, And you'll find detail of that in all my previous lectures at the more technical level. See the videos. But the planning language does all of this stuff quite well. So that's a way of achieving these things. But I was particularly interested in the very last point here of validating requirements to ensure the resulting solution will perform as intended. And now it's a little bit vague here. What we need to do is validate that the resulting solution delivers the requirements. And you can do that in two ways that I'm going to point out to you. One is theoretically using an impact estimation table where you estimate how good the architecture is for the requirements. And the second way, after you've decided to go with something, is to measure step by step using what I call the EVO method, which is my form of Agile, measure that in fact the design or architecture is actually delivering the security or whatever major values you've decided to go for. So I'm going to talk about two specific and interesting ways of doing this particular one. Here is Rick Dove, our historian, and he takes from 1997 and he finds people starting to write about what we'd call business agility today. 2001, 19 years ago, Rick, sorry, the person who wrote this is David F. Rico, and I got a little bit distracted by this here because I put a picture of Rick Dove, and here's Dove. Okay, so 2001, Rick Dove was talking about response ability. That was one of the earliest names for business agility, if you like, response ability. And you'll see that agility doesn't really pop up until 2009, which is, a good 10 years after the Agile Manifesto made the agility word itself very popular, but then agility shift and government agility and things like that. So here you have historically, I'm sure you can look up on the internet, get papers for all of these people and what they do. But I wanted to give you sort of an overview of the last 20 or so years. We have been dealing with business agility at some level of theory and practice under various names. So David Rico, here's his picture. Here's his wonderful website, absolutely free downloads massively about everything about lean and agile coming out of your ears, and not least quantitative analysis of all of it as best he can, trying to collect data about how powerful it is and what it costs and what its return on investment is. And so here we are right up to 2020 this year, a Harvard study done by Tomke in 500 public firms, finding these numbers from sources like these. And I can't promise you any of this is true, but David's doing his best to get some facts and numbers. And I think we can't, I really detest sort of arm waving, you should use method X because I'm holding a lecture and I say so. I think anything anybody suggests, including my own methods, one ought to be able to give some numbers and experiences and even studies of multi-experiences indicating how good it is compared to anything else. And David certainly tries to do that. So here's the whole, actually all of these studies are from 2020. You want the details, you want more, davidfrico.com. Now I'm going to use Rick Dove a number of times because the pictures here are agile, but they're not your typical Scrum Agile doing software. They're much more complex. They talk about physical architecture. Scrum never talks about architecture. They talk about stakeholders. Scrum and conventional Agile talks about customers and users, but as good as never about stakeholders. So long story short, he's in my domain, in the domain I want to talk about, which is that the values are stakeholder values, and the design is done by an architectural process, which is an engineering architectural process. So I'm not going to comment in detail about these. You can look them up. but they are the far different from the conventional Scrum-like or even SAFe-like Agile that we're used to. So I've been spending a little bit too much time with my programming and IT friends, and of course we're talking to British Computer Society here, so I guess I'm still talking to people interested in IT, but I hope my message reaches a chief technical officer level, chief operating officer level, things like that. What we're looking at is organizations of any kind, including nothing to do with IT, who want to manage their improvements at any level of organization, any scale, like the world, any technology, like not software, not computers, and not IT is an option. Let's just say rockets to the moon, and for any purposes, okay? So any objectives. So in other words, whole different world, okay? And here's another definition, if you like, of Managility. It's the systems engineering discipline. So I'm being very clear about systems and engineering of pursuing non-trivial organizational survival. 3 people programming something for a few weeks is trivial compared to the scale and type of organizations I'm interested in here and we're talking about. So we're talking about things like national health systems, educational systems for a country, a whole university as a small entity there, and things like that. And we're pursuing success, and we're very open as to how we're going to pursue the success. Quite simply, the best available methods. So in a year, there will be some new methods available that we don't even know about now. And the whole point is, the moment they pop up, we need to somehow sense whether they might be promising, somehow trial them or get some data on them, and somehow take them and put them into use as soon as possible, and validate that they work for us on a larger scale. So in other words, we're not locked into Scrum masters and sprints and user stories. We will dump all of that the moment we find some best available methods that are better than that. And I'm going to very specifically suggest some that for these purposes, large non-trivial organization are superior to anything found in the Agile methods used by IT people widely today. The priorities for Managility are this, and again, have a little fun here. It does say product owner and Scrum Master, doesn't it? But look at the complexity of this by comparison with the simple diagrams we have. So the first Managility priority is success, and don't ever fail. And in particular, don't ever fail big. Like we have projects in Little Norway, where I am right now, that fail for 8 to 12 years and for billions of quid. And of course, every country has those government projects and some private ones. If a few smaller sprints of a week or a month fail, and you quickly are agile enough to fix it fast and firmly and get back on track, that's okay. Okay. So very small failures, controlled failures are quite okay. Fail fast is the word you've all heard. But large cumulative failure over several years is ridiculous and unnecessary if you're using Agile properly, which means, for example, let's say 5 sprints in a row, you got failure. Well, it's time to stop the whole project and say, we obviously don't know what we're doing, even on a small scale. So let's retrain or replace the people doing it with people who can at least succeed sprint by sprint and accumulate the sprints. Okay, but you don't do 50 to 100 sprints in a row and at the end of 8 years say, sorry, forget it, the whole national health system won't work and it's a failure. Okay, that's it's amazing. Even people using Scrum on a very large scale to do their software are actually delivering to, say, the government social security projects and health projects, which are not actually trying to deliver improvements to the stakeholders. They're just delivering code to the computer with no bugs and the right functions and the right user stories. But they're not incrementally delivering real value to real users. And that's sick. That should be outlawed. But they say, we're doing Agile, and but they're doing Agile on the code, and I'm not talking about that at all. Okay. So the second priority is, aside from not failing, not having big failures ever at all, is to succeed. And what does that mean? Well, it means succeed early. In each and every sprint, normally, with few exceptions, will succeed in delivering planned values. Continuously, step after step after step, increments. And the results are impressive because you will prioritize delivery of extremely high value for extremely low cost, using things like my impact estimation table to decide what is extremely high value, what is extremely low cost, and to decompose it and deliver it. So in other words, the early step should be not building platforms and structures so that you can do the wonderful thing in 8 years. The focus is on delivering results, usually using the old system, the old people, the old habits as a base, and slowly but surely shifting them out in the weaker areas and making the whole system, like the national health system, stronger and stronger. So the Managility says use any management methods, including ones you never heard of until today, or you will never hear of until 5 years from now, that actually work best for you. And there are no limitations. Jokingly, I'm saying use magic if it works. Go to Harry Potter and wave the wand if it works. Who cares? Okay. The basic Managility assumes an environment that one, it's about organizations, not IT. It assumes the organization is under pressure, like lost all their income during COVID and just about to go bankrupt. It assumes there are horrible risks there, like they may never get their income stream up in time to avoid getting government grants or going out of business. Think airlines here, okay? This is our environment, and then the methods that I'm going to suggest are primarily, if we could do one single thing, get clarity of objectives at the base. That is, all the top 10 critical objectives at any level are always quantified, always measurable and trackable, always clear, always well structured and intelligible. We're not there yet. Most places, people don't even really know what I'm talking about, unless you've heard my lectures before. I'll show you some examples in a moment. But if we could just get this basic idea of management agility through clarity of objectives, that's the foundation upon which we build everything else. Agility itself is totally dependent on the clarity of objectives we don't have and you probably don't have. Then after that, anything you like, any best available method that helps you meet those quantified objectives, okay? And we need to constantly be on the lookout for better methods, trialing them, experimenting, looking for data, proving them out, and integrating them into our way of doing things as fast as possible. That means, say, COVID fast, this week, this month, not we'll study it for a year or 2 or 3 and wait for the new managing director who will then bring us back to zero and we'll never do anything, okay? So the Managility environment in more detail, okay? So organizations of any kind with any systems, okay? So it could be a charity organization like World Health Organization, World Health Organization or World Food Program, for example, won the Nobel Prize. And I have indeed worked with like the Norwegian Christian Aid for a few years, introducing my methods, and they were out there doing peace processes and building better water wells in Eritrea. This is 20 years ago. And there was no IT there. There was just a Christian will to do good in the world and help people. And we use these methods there. Again, they're under pressures, like they recognize that great improvements are needed, but they're not sure how to get them fast enough. They ran out of money and the government isn't granting them enough. There's international chaos, like there's COVID everywhere and depression everywhere. And there are severe constraints, like nobody can get out of their house to work together. Those are pressures we're all under, and we're going to be under them for a while. And when all the COVID pressures are gone, something new will pop up, believe you me, if history is any guide. And then we have all the risks, the technological changes, the political and legal changes, the economic fluctuations, and the environmental problems, like our town just got hit by a tornado and got wiped out or something like that. So, okay, so that's a little bit more detail on the environment I expect I'm addressing here. Now, what are the methods that I'm suggesting? Okay, again, a little bit more detail. I believe that all objectives, you might like the term requirements, okay, but whatever name we choose, these are our ends, these are our requirements, these are our objectives, these are how good we want to be in the future. These are our changes, our improvements. Now, I believe that all of these should be quantified. That makes them pretty clear, because you can misunderstand enhanced, but you can't misunderstand 64.5, okay? And structured, meaning we're going to model the reality of all the different stakeholders and the different situations and the different emergency situations and things like that. And we're going to put that in our model too. So it's going to be it's structured like a user story has a very interesting 3-level structure. I'm thinking of going 10 times further down the road in terms of structure, okay? The objectives are very well defined, so nobody can misunderstand them. Today, almost everybody's objectives can be misunderstood. I was working with a client today at the top management level, and I was shown the requirements they have, and they're the PowerPoint bullshit level, and they're total chaos, and they're ruining the organization. We're going to try and work on that within a month or two. But that's everywhere. That's not this one organization. We need to have measurability as we deliver enhanced value towards our quantified objectives. We need to be able to track and measure incremental progress towards the degree of security we want, or the degree of flexibility of personnel we want, or something like that. We have to also deal with multiple objectives simultaneously, like at least the top 10, okay? And there will be many different levels of concern, each of which will have a top 10, which will be related to things above them. So there are multiple hierarchies of multiple objectives, and we have to consider these simultaneously. And this is like juggling 10 balls simultaneously in the air and not dropping any of them. And that's tricky, but precondition is that they're quantified, clear, measurable, and trackable. And then again, best methods, this is the anything category. And first we're going to apply an idea of cost effectiveness. In other words, the methods will be effective for that in meeting our purposes, and they will be cost effective. That is, they will have low human costs and money costs and time costs. And actually effectiveness is multidimensional. Those are the effectiveness of our organization doing things. And the costs are multidimensional. For about 10 of these and 5 of these, we have to manage and juggle simultaneously. And people do not know how to deal with multiple objectives simultaneously. I'm going to give you tools to do it based on, as a starter, that they're quantified and measurable, but we're going to use a table. I'll show you examples of that to do it. And we need methods that are much more effective than what we're looking at in even the Business Agile environments that I'm trying to give you some idea of what's going on there. There's still some of them stuck at the user story level to simplify what I'd like to say, but they're not good enough. There are too few of them that are extremely clear about not only you should quantify. Some of them do say things like that. They mumble metrics, they mumble Moscow and things like that. But when it comes to it, you can't ever see any examples of them really quantifying the security they want. To take a simple example, they still mumble it. They still use bullshit. So we need methods that are much more effective than the methods in common use. The methods in common use, if you just Google failed, let's stick to IT for a moment, failed IT projects, but other projects aren't that much different. We have a 20 to 95% failure rate, where when you're at 95%, you have about 40% total failure and a 45% challenged. Okay, so we have ridiculously high failure rates, which everybody realizes must be caused by the poor methods we use, but they haven't really figured out what methods are going to help. One theory was called Agile will solve the problem, and it did. 40% failure rates for Big Bang Waterfall went down to 20% for Scrum, according to Jeff Sutherland. I believe him, but a 20% failure rate of all projects is ridiculously high. What if 1/5 of all surgical operations resulted in the death of the patient? By the way, I'm your surgeon. I've just done 4 successful operations, and you're next. You like it? We are ridiculous, even at our best, with the best Agile that's out there. We've got Agile is good, but we need to control the Agile by more engineering quantified methods, and they are sorely lacking from, for example, the Scrum environment, to put it mildly. So here's my hypothesis about methods. Now, this is actually a list of the things I've held detailed talks on that you can find in the videos for this at the SPA Specialist Group site. Here's a free book on it, which you can pull down anytime you like, Competitive Engineering. And obviously, I don't have time to begin to, I mean, you know, this alone quantification is a 2-hour lecture, right? So decomposition, as Sohir knows, we did a 1-day training course at British Computer Society on her request, just on this alone, 1 whole day. So, but I'm giving you a finite list, the detail of which is in this book and in previous lectures for BCS. And that's my set of starting ideas that I believe are the ones that will help us have really agile organizations. Okay. Now, why have I suggested the methods? Well, in very simple terms, they're the best ones I know about. And if anybody knows about any better methods, and I'll define better, they're more cost effective for your purposes. If they are, use them. Don't use my methods. Okay. But anybody want to submit better methods, they better be prepared to submit proof of cost effectiveness compared to these. All these are nicely measured industrially by corporations like Hewlett-Packard, Ericsson, Intel, and on and on and on. You'll find much of the measurement information in this book and in other of my lectures. So you've got to compete against known capabilities, not to say, I have a new idea, it's different, it's cool, it's simple, buy my new agile method. There's too much of that going on, to put it mildly, and it's ridiculous. It's almost like I just invented a new COVID vaccine yesterday, and I believe everybody should take it. I'm sure it will solve the problem. That's not on. Okay, we know why. So we got to treat this a little bit more seriously. So the methods are suggested because they're the best ones I've found in about 60 years of mucking about the world in large qualified corporations. And I'm looking forward to learning better and better methods. And I'm in the process of working on some very advanced AI machine learning methods, which will be publicized when we're ready to do it. But I'm nowhere near finished learning about new methods, and I hope you aren't either. So another reason then I'm suggesting these methods is that they are studied and measured, published independently of my personal opinion by reputable corporations. You'll find that in all my writings all over the place. These methods have decades of stable success and close to zero failure rate. Okay, again, finite named corporations that I've talked about have done this. We don't have any large-scale failures at all using my methods that I know about. If anybody using my methods has a large-scale failure they'd like to tell me about, please tell me about it. I suppose it could happen if you misuse the method bad enough. That's Jeff Sutherland's big problem, that whenever Scrum doesn't work, he says it's because they didn't do it properly, and he's probably right. These methods are modular. You can do them one at a time. You can try them out one at a time. You don't have to adopt everything I suggest. If they don't work, you can pull them out. And if they do work, you can keep them in, add it to their module. And they're synergistic with each other. That is, they cooperate and work with each other. They all know about each other. The methods can and have been digitized, in other words, put into apps, and we're already using simple forms of AI, such as automated prioritization based on quantified goals and quantification of how good strategies are. And they enable complex thinking. Complex thinking, when you're doing 15 objectives and 20 strategies simultaneously, and you're gathering data on them continuously, you have a pretty complex way of doing things. We have automated that, and we've automated the decision-making around that. Again, I've shown this in my previous lectures, so that's one place to go. We're looking at a tool called ValPlan here, if it is not familiar to anybody. The other thing is these tools all recognize and acknowledge that it's not about one dimension like better security or UX, better usability. It's about maybe 10 very critical dimensions at the same time. And by the way, there are 20 or 30 other dimensions that didn't make the cut, that weren't prioritized enough, but they're there and they count. It's just that we maybe have to give up the idea of managing 40 dimensions simultaneously and be very happy if we can initially manage 10 most critical dimensions. And when we've managed them, delivered their goals, we can turn around and say, what are the next 10 dimensions? Okay, so 10 is just a number for prioritizing the initial dimensions we're going to work on. But the fact that we have many dimensions simultaneously is an absolute requirement for good methods. And I don't mean 10 bullshit objectives on a PowerPoint slide. I mean quantified multiple dimensions that you can track each step of the way. Okay. The methods apply and have been proven to apply for decades at management levels as well as technical levels, i.e. rocket systems and things like that, equally well. So you can use them on your organizational agility and on your product and service agility, same methods. So one basic method to learn. The methods are proven scale-free. If you like the proof, you get this, but they're proven for decades in practice to work on very small and extremely large critical without being changed. So you don't have to move from Scrum to SAFe to scale up. This one set of methods, in a sense, adjusts or can be adjusted automatically to any scale, and in fact, have a proven track record there. Let's see, yeah, the methods are all based on an engineering and science paradigm. Lots of quantification, feedback, measurement, and proof, the way you prove a virus before you release it to the public. Now, who is in control of all these methods? And the very simple answer is, you are in control, you can have them. I've already given you the detailed information, such as the competitive engineering book, which is 500 pages with all the standards for using them. And you can adopt the standards or modify the standards or find your own, but they're rules, defined processes, defined exit entry conditions between processes, and 700 glossary definitions, for example. So competitive engineering is a free standards handbook, which anybody can do anything they want with. You don't have to follow all my ideas. They're just the best ones I had at the time. Basically everything I do of import is Creative Commons or just simply free. All you really need is access to these slides and the links and the books and the videos, and you should be able to practice this on your own. Okay. Now, not surprisingly, some people who are called consultants, the people maybe being coaches today, might like to have as a trade to assist businesses in using these methods. There is a market for that. But in theory, if you're smart enough, you can do this all alone. We have examples of clients who've done it without any interference from me, for example, Intel being one of them, with 20,000 people, engineers taught the methods, but basically using the competitive engineering book as a guide. Okay, you need no permission to use the method. You can use them or misuse them. It's up to you. No approval or certification is necessary or desired. These methods are self-measuring. If they're any good, you will get numbers that tell you how good they are. And if you don't get the numbers, they're no good. This whole certification mafia racket makes me sick, and quite a few other people too, but a lot of people are earning good money on it and they need the money. I know people handing out certificates who totally agree with me, and I say, if you totally agree with me that, say, Scrum Master certification is a racket with no particular usefulness, why are you doing it? And their simple answer is, I need the money. Okay? So it's not like the people training it don't realize how bad it is, but if you're stupid enough to give them your money because you think you're getting something valuable, there are people who need to take it because they need to feed their family. But don't kid yourself. They might know better themselves. But I think I wouldn't mind having a cottage industry from all good people on helping to implement these methods. You're very welcome to it. Real organizational results happen in the short term, every week, every sprint, every month, and in the long term. And these results are the judge of whether the methods are any good or not certifications, not diplomas, etc. Now, people can offer their services for free, like a university, free university teaching about this. And they're very welcome to all of my slides and books and teaching materials, as far as I haven't already given them away to a publisher or something like that. But competitive engineering is an example of a book which is in the free territory as a digital one. You can buy actually paper copies. Some people will necessarily need to be paid for their services, and that's okay too, as long as they're really delivering value for money provably, and their own proof of the fact that a consultant is giving you good results for their money is that they are delivering measurable stakeholder values quickly and frequently and continuously, and they're teaching you as an organization how to do it. Then they're worth their salt. The many large-scale consultants that spend 8 years, we just had one with PwC Corporation in Norway, spent 8 years, spent 196 million kroner on a feasibility study for a medical record system. Okay, and then they concluded after 8 years of doing nothing and nothing happening and spending a lot of money that 22 billion kroner and 8 more years would be required to actually deliver any result. Now that's ridiculous, but that's a public scandal happening right now in Norway. It's in the newspapers and everybody knows it's PwC and the bad guys in the health service, okay, and bad government management and governance. So the judgment of whether what I'm suggesting or what you pull in is any good, those are case studies, quantifications of what's happening, at least in single projects, perhaps academics coming in and doing scientific research, as they have in my methods many times, many places. And for example, we had studies at Microsoft of using my methods by professors at MIT, for example, and Hewlett Packard was studied, and things like that. Intel studied themselves. Yeah. And okay, anyway, so that's the control and permission. In other words, not the usual certification and payments, but essentially free ideas, perhaps payment for work which helps you accelerate and go faster. That's valid. Doing it yourself without experienced people might result in it takes you a year to get there, and you could get there in 3 months with an experienced, knowledgeable consultant. Here is your traditional Agile, more or less. You all sort of recognize this picture. And I'm specifically rejecting the conventional methods. One, because they all seem to have unclear requirements. And by the way, in these methods, I'm including almost all the enterprise architecture methods. I've commented on them in detail in my book, Value Requirements, which is a freebie, and you'll find lectures on that and the links to the book at the British Computer Society video sites. But so the development methods and the architecture methods just don't even seem to know that they have unclear requirements. In fact, they often say you should have clear requirements, and then you look around for them, you beg for examples, and you get nothing. And you know, so they think a term like extremely high security is a clear requirement. And you know what? It isn't. Okay. Most user stories, as much as I admire the wonderful triology structure there, most user stories are, number one, they aren't even requirements, they're usually designs. And number two, they're almost every word is ambiguous. So nice try, but not, and good enough for small projects, by the way. But they're not good enough for saving the world or a large corporation. So ambiguity and confusion of ends and means, anything there, bad methods, okay? Any kind of enterprise architecture, we're talking TOGAF and we're talking Zachman and all these things. I find nothing to admire, and I criticize them on 20 points in great detail, okay? Anything that keeps on saying user, UX, user story, use cases, or customer, they are good enough for a small scale, more than good enough, no problem. But as you start scaling up, you reach a point where you have to talk about the other 50 to 500 stakeholders, like the law on privacy, GDPR in European Union, okay? Which is not a user and not a customer, but boy, does it have requirements. So we just had a big scandal in Norway trying to build a COVID app, and they built it very quickly, but long story short, they did not respect the GDPR, and some of my friends got onto them, and the government finally agreed, quashed the whole effort, threw away the app. Great public scandal, because half the Norwegian population hoped to save themselves from COVID, and had downloaded it. And they're now building a new one. And now they're not one of the first ones to have one on the market. They'll be one of the last ones using, you know, the Google, Apple solutions. So that's a simple example of a stakeholder called European law, to which Norway, as an EU associate member, is subject, has to be respected. And they're not a user and they're not a customer. And yet we have to analyze them and bring them into the thinking. Otherwise, we totally waste the whole project. And that was Smittestop, which means disease stopping, was the name of the app I'm referring to there. So I'm sure there are lots more examples than that. But you know, if you analyze why projects fail, you'll find that there's a stakeholder that's been ignored with a critical requirement you cannot ignore that has been ignored. Okay, and that leads to total destruction of any effort, even if it's 8 years and 8 billion pounds. Any framework, and most of the agile things are built as frameworks, SAFe and Scrum, without sharp engineering tools. Think quantified, 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 built in. Okay, now, if you push, like my good friend Jeff Sutherland, who publicly agrees that the methods I'm talking about are a very good thing, very advanced, and should be built into Scrum. But if you say, why isn't it built into Scrum? The short story is Scrum is intended to be a framework, and anything you need that isn't there, you have to build in. So you can build in what I'm talking about into Scrum, but you have to do it yourself. You're not going to get it from Scrum.org or Scrum Inc. or any people like that. They are committed to their framework. They're not committed to all the things I'm talking about. Which is, in other words, to use Scrum at a larger scale, you're gonna have to build in certain things. Any methods that have a 2-day course with following certifications where you can sit at home on the internet and look up the answers, and I did that just to see if it would work, were sold at a very high price. Any methods like that, that's a racket. Anybody who buys them is stupid. I know you're saying you know, but you needed the certification and got you a job. Well, good luck to you, but you didn't learn anything useful, okay? Almost everything that's worthwhile in building large complex systems called education and practice in medicine, engineering, and science takes years, okay? And the important thing isn't actually to get a diploma, but the ability to operate on a patient and not kill every 5th patient when you do it. And that takes years of education and years of practice, okay? Your 10,000 hours to become proficient, as Gladwell would say. Now, methods that have no measures of success and no evidence of success, and there are plenty of them, and people adopt them and pay for them and listen to them. I'm just amazed how many methods are out there. With you say, well, what's the measure of success? You know, give me a case study, give me one measure. Nothing. Okay, design sprint is actually a very good example of a method where the book by Jake has one example in it. It's of a failed business known as Sears. And you can't get anything more out of it. It's amazing how many people flock to design sprint because they heard a rumor that Google used to do it and Google was successful. Therefore, if they use design sprint, they will be as successful as Google. That's ridiculous. Everybody at Google puts their clothes on in the morning before going to work. So if your employees all put their clothes on in the morning before going to work, you will be as successful as Google. Now, if you're stupid enough to believe that, go and do design sprint. But as Dr. Deming said, survival is not compulsory, okay? So, you know, do like good vaccine people, look for evidence and facts before publishing your medicine. Let's see how we're doing. Now, I've actually used my hour and I'm sort of halfway through my slides, not surprising. I think what I'll do is I'll do a
Then we go
sorry,
for another 5-10 minutes, and because we have some questions.
Good. Okay, we have some questions, so it's time to put your questions in. I'm going to round off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the high-level overview and my slides getting into somewhat more detail. I'll leave them for you to read or to look at the other lectures where we've gone into far more detail. So here's Rick Dove with a fairly advanced agile model. See, it says agile team, agile release train, value stream. Now we're talking metrics and value vision. Now we're talking. But if you take a deep look at this, I've got a long list of really important things that are not there. You know, even one of these, like not dealing with stakeholders, is bad enough, you know, but any one of these is enough to kill your large-scale project. You have to have all these things in with your large-scale projects, and even fairly advanced versions of Business Agile do not contain the necessary ingredients for avoiding failure and getting success. I'd like to introduce you to Brian Gallagher, who I got to meet, I think I mentioned it earlier, and he does really interesting things in this area, including a whole doctoral thesis on risk, which you can have the previous slide. But he's got really interesting ideas and models of agile and architecture and things like that. On the 2nd of October, in other words, just 12 days ago, I got a publication from the US Department of Defense on Agile. And, but to make a long story short, I was not very impressed, and I told them so in great detail. But however, it's the latest and greatest from the US Department of Defense on Agile, so you can see how bad it is. But they did at least understand that they had to have good control of the illities and qualities qualities and costs. And some people haven't gotten to that stage even. But if you looked for evidence that they really did quantify and manage them simultaneously, that was totally missing, and I told them so. So I'm very, very disappointed in the level the U.S. Department of Defense is at here. Let's see, there was another paper, but we won't get into that. We don't have time for that. Okay, so here are my suggestions. We need to have much better stakeholder focus, like 50 stakeholders. We need to quantify the top 10 value objectives. We need to analyze all the strategies multidimensionally and quantitatively, and we need to use quantified quality control in the planning. Now, I've gone into all of these subjects in great depth in the value series, which we've done, and the slides, the free books, and the videos are out there if anybody wants to know more what we're talking about. Especially for you guys, I wrote the Managility principles, and I have 1 or 2 slides for each one of these, but no time. But let's take a look at the first one. First one is saying something about, which I've said several times, quantified structure. So here's an example from my book, Vision Engineering for Top Management. And here's a free download to it. Merck, famous large-scale company, and I analyzed some of their goals: to preserve and improve human life. All of our actions must be measured by our success in achieving this goal. Now, that sounds very nice, but it's a bullshit goal, okay? Here, I've taken the time and trouble in great detail, which you'll find in the book here, to quantify. Here's the scale of measure, and structure. Here is some structure. Here is some structure without going into detail, and make that goal operational for the whole organization so that you can communicate it unequivocally. You can track its progress. You can use it to find strategies and evaluate them and prioritize them. So that's what I mean by quantification. So for example, a good short 50-page summary of all those things I'm recommending for the top level is actually found in the Vision Engineering free booklet, which is at that DL 926 level. So, and here is another list of what I mean by doing things in more detail and with more structure. I won't go through the list, but I'll leave it there. The beauty is most of these things can be brought in incrementally in small steps, and you don't have to take the whole package of 1 to 8 here. You could do a little quantification and then a success level, and then bring in the other things gradually. So you can, in an agile way, try out these ideas and see if they work for you. And if they work, you'll want to do more. As Eric Simmons of Intel said, after years and thousands of engineers using the method, said, this stuff works. That's the difference. Many people tell you what you should do. I'm telling you how to do it in excruciating detail, and the how to do it is proven to work by people quite independent of my personal opinion about my methods. So here I'm going to stop there, and we will entertain some questions. I can see me. What do I have to do to see everybody else? Okay. View everyone. Sounds like a good idea.
Sorry?
It says view everyone.
We have one of the questions here. It says, if someone is not at CTO or higher management level, then how can he or she justify these learnings for promotion in consulting usage within the organization without having certificate to showcase?
Okay, let me rewrite the question as I understand it. I'm assuming most of the...
You can see it in the question panel as well.
Yeah, hi. So this question was from me. So I just wanted to know that since I'm a very new professional in Agile, so yeah, so I just want to know since if I don't go for a like a certification from Scrum or something like that, and by following these models, which I think very good models, which our host showed today. So how would I be able to show my credibility in the organization, because these days there is this trend of certificates which are going on. I mean, everybody like to
Yeah,
know the certificate. Yeah, so I hope you got my question right.
yeah, I understood your question the right way. We didn't need all that. Okay.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
let me say, I assume that most of the people here are, let's call them British Computer Society members, roughly.
yeah,
Okay, others are invited, and this is not the Institute of Management or Institute
yeah,
of Directors where the CEOs are. So I'm not assuming I mean, I would love my, you're welcome to take my talk and my slides and throw it at your CEO if you're good enough friends. But I'm not expecting the CEOs to be listening to me right now. I'm actually expecting people at BCS who want to apply Agile at a higher level than just the code and the IT system. Okay. And it could be just a very large organization with very large IT, with maybe a 1,000 or more IT people involved, like a large London bank would have 6,000 IT people. So that qualifies as a very large organization that needs to be agile, right? So I'm assuming there are some people in organizations like that, which I've worked in a lot in London. Okay, so now here, I'll make it simple. Um, uh, what you need to do is take these ideas and prove them out on step by step in small steps on your own project, the one you're working on. Okay. And
okay,
if they're as good as I think they are, you will get very good results. And you'll have an argument that these methods can be used at a higher level of, say, a program of IT, right? And who knows, maybe in time you will get promoted to higher and higher levels of the organization, and you will bring with you methods that you know have worked. Okay. So we have a case study from several or almost all the organizations I've worked with. My ideas and myself have been brought in by somebody who probably was a member of the BCS. Okay. And they liked the ideas, but they needed the help and support of the top management. Some of them very consciously worked their way up by getting presentations and appointments to first the CIO, and then the chief technical officer, and finally sometimes the CEO. Although they don't usually try to operate there. So in other words, one person. I'll give you a simple example. The fellow I mentioned at Intel, Eric Simmons, you'll find he wrote one of the 3 forewords to the competitive engineering book, so you can get to know him there. And he'd been using my methods for about 8 years at that point. I met him at a computer conference in Portland, Oregon. He asked me to have breakfast with him in his consultancy, and I did. And then he took a job at Intel, the largest employer in Portland, Oregon, probably 100,000 people. And he made it his private campaign, somehow supported by management and the culture, to teach my methods. He had training courses. He took all my things and built his own slides, of which I have copies I could share with people at this point. And he also offered consulting to teams who wanted to, and most of the teams were not IT teams. They were building semiconductor products. Okay. And every year he'd report another 3,000 engineers had been trained, and everybody was doing it, and everybody was telling everybody else this stuff worked, and they should all learn to do Planguage with clear quantified goals and the specification quality control method for quality control. And it spread, one, because Eric started the spread, and he supported it by training and consulting. One person on his own. He didn't have a budget. He wasn't hired to do it, but he got a budget and he did it, okay? And he made it work. And because it worked, it spread because you could always point to a few thousand people who'd done it and liked it, would tell their colleagues that this works better than anything else we have. So the same thing happened at Ericsson in Sweden. An Icelandic farmer, Polly, discovered me and my ideas in Norway at a port of Ericsson, brought us into Ericsson in Sweden, and we spent 10 years training most all of the engineers actually in our methods. But Polly was fearless. He would make appointments with top managers 6 levels above him for him and me to come and talk to the top manager about these things. And we usually had results behind us that we could point to. So that's another example of one fearless person who made it their private campaign. And by the way, this is fun on the one hand, because it's not boring work. It's a little bit discouraging because the whole organization doesn't buy in 1 month because you have a great idea. All of these people have used years, literally 5 to 20 years of their career to spread these ideas in one large organization like Hewlett Packard or Microsoft or Boeing or Intel, things like that. So you need to be prepared, but ultimately you can get credit at being the founder, the guy who had the courage to start it when nobody else was listening, and the guy who made it work. And you know, you deserve a very high salary and an even better job at another corporation as a result of, or start your own company, spread these methods. You deserve that. You build up your skills by doing it. You build up your case studies and numbers by measuring what's going on, capturing the data, and then holding talks at BCS about it, by the way, anytime you like, and you know, publishing blogs and things like that. Okay, so long story short, we don't have to start with the top management. I can talk about occasions where I did get to start with top management fairly early. That also works. It goes faster, it's more powerful, but it's mostly we start by proving things at a local level where we have the power and the time to do things a little bit differently, as long as we don't screw it up, as long as we can show that this is working very well. I will limit my answer to that.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
We
By the
have
way,
another.
I can't see anybody. Should I be able to see people? I've got attendees 23. I've got.
No.
They would have
Okay,
to turn their cameras on.
Okay, would
we
be wonderful.
We had a
I'd
question
like to see
from John Beard.
Yeah.
Okay, John. Go ahead.
Well, I'll read
Hello?
it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
I was just
John,
thinking, an off-the-wall thought. Some criminal organisations are a lot better than, more agile than industry is. What can we learn from
You're
them?
right. You are so right. And there's always the thing, if you have a good, I remember my good friend Gerald Weinberg was always afraid that his good methods would fall in the hand of evil operators. We're in the middle of the Cold War, by the way, at that point. So he didn't want to publish anything for fear it would fall in the hands of bad people. And I have the same fear, but I've taken a long look at history, and I found that the good guys win in the long term. And you're just going to have to suffer the fact that my wonderful methods might be used by a criminal organization. And there's we can't stop progress by stopping information about anything better. That wouldn't be agile. But yes, criminal and politically nasty organizations like the Nazis and the Soviets are arguably more agile than many a large business or organization like the health services. Sad, but and they're successful and big because they were agile.
Yeah, but that's an interesting example because those are organizations based on fear. Yeah, whereas
yeah.
You know, the agile values stress, respect, and mutual cooperation.
Actually, the mafia believes very strongly in respect and mutual cooperation. Demo. I'm joking a little bit, but you know, it's
based on fear.
Respect. I just want a little bit of respect, said the Godfather.
They are less tied up in some of the laws.
Yeah, true.
Okay, did I sort of answer a question? Yeah.
Regulators don't have a lot to say to them.
Next question.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah. Out of all the PDFs which you showed in the presentation, if there is any such PDF which you think is suitable for beginners in Agile, so please share the link for that. That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Now, yeah. I'm not going to give you beginning in Agile in terms of Scrum and certification. This is a special form of Agile. I've made that clear, right? For large, complex systems and organizations. So, and right now there is no certification in this, and I hope there will. The only form of certification is it produces results, like it has at most of my clients, the Intel, Boeing, Hewlett-Packard. They report results in business, right? Then it's certified in that sense. Okay. So now, but your question really boils down to, Tom, have you got a simple way for me to learn to do these things? Now, you need to begin.
Sorry.
Now here, let me suggest that if you go again, Imo, can you put the website for all the videos of our many webcams on?
Yeah, sure.
Now, if you go to that website, you'll find about 7 talks by me, some of them about requirements, and if you want to learn more about that, that's a good place to go. That will get you a book, value requirements, a set of slides, value requirements, and me talking for about an hour about value requirements. Now, I think that's free. That's from BCS. That's an excellent way of beginning to learn on your own and maybe share with colleagues these ideas. There's the second one is called Value Design. That's looking at design and architecture. There's Value Management, looking at the management aspects, the project management level and things like that. And there's this which tries to take a look at the enterprise level of Agile. So now in all of these, you will find links to papers, slides, cases, and free books. In fact, at the end of all the slides, there's about 4 pages of free downloadable references. Okay, and now there's a lot in total, but there's a lot of, like 1 hour to listen to a lecture from me isn't going to kill you and drown out your time. And you can do it in 10-minute slots or whatever you like. It's just a video. So so there's plenty of self-study material to begin to do it. At some point, you need to stop listening to the theory and me and start doing it. So let me give you a start for everybody. Next time you're sitting in a meeting or looking at slides for a project, take a look at the requirements or objectives. I was doing that today, okay? And with a real large multinational company who's become a client of mine. And if you take a look at you'll find that the bullshit is there. All the PowerPoint slides where it says, we will achieve the following benefits, right? And there are some bullet pointed things, and it says better security and better flexibility and blah. There's always an adjective like better, enhanced, improved. There's a noun like privacy, security, flexibility. But these things are never properly defined. Now, your job is to take at least one of those and try to define it like I'm talking about in the value requirements stuff. Quantify it. Okay, that's the start. And then you maybe go back to the people who were in the meeting and said, I had to think about these things we were looking at and I couldn't understand them. And I realized they were a little bit ambiguous. And so I tried to make sense of it. And here is my example. I suggest we do this with all 10 of the objectives, and then we'll all have a clearer shared understanding for this project. That's a great start. You might like to get together with a friendly colleague and say, the 2 of us, let's take the effort to clarify these top management goals, which are not very clear, and let's understand how to do it. Let's use Gilb's method, Planguage, and then talk about, bring it up in subtle ways with people who might be what I found is top managers are actually very interested in getting clarity of their goals. And nobody has taken the time and trouble to show them how to do it. Most people don't know how to do it, right? And so the top management and the business schools certainly don't train them. They train them on how to quantify all the financials, but the other side of the balanced scorecard, all the qualities of the organization, they don't train them to do that. Okay, so you ideally you would make friends with the top management by saying, this will give you more power as a top manager to both articulate your objectives and check that your objectives are being followed. Do you want that power, or do you want the organization just do any old dumb thing it wants with no responsibility? Because that's what's going on right now.
Yeah.
So that's a way to start.
Okay, I'll definitely follow that. Thank you.
Oh, by the way, let me give you an even better offer. My email, I'm going to give it to you orally. It should be really easy to remember. tom@gilb.com. Okay. So
Okay.
if you want to start and you've pulled out, say, one of these things and you're not sure quite what to do, if you email me and say, Tom, I've had a shot at it, but it's difficult. Can you help me out? I'll give you free help and advice to get you started in your organization in confidence. Okay, I do a lot of that. I have about 3 or 4 people at every day I'm juggling, helping them get things done in their organizations. Okay, I also do paid contracts almost against my will, but because I'm pensioned and I don't need the money. But don't tell my rich clients that.
That's a fantastic
Okay.
offer, isn't it?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Tom. It was fantastic as usual. And we are looking forward to another event very soon.
Okay. Oh, so here I have just, if I can, as Steve Jobs says, just one more thing. If you want
Sure.
a really simple way to start, you will use the Life Design book. Unfortunately, that's behind a small paywall at my website. But if you are so poor you can't afford 14 euros, email me. I'll send you a free copy of Life Design book. But you have to promise me to read it and give me a review. But that's the simplest way to get into these methods for planning your own organization called You, Yourself, and Your Family. Sorry, Tosir.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been very challenging for me to up my game a little bit and bring these methods into the enterprise area. I've been working in the area, but not thinking very much about it as a collection. So now I was forced to think about this enterprise level rather than the IT level. So thank you very much, Tohir, for inviting me in a Business Change group to do it.
And see you soon, and take care.
Thank you.
Right. Okay.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much. Bye.
Everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.